fireplace here with flames licking up. Actually, if you see any flames licking up, don't just enjoy, just go running for the exits. I mean, there's a serious problem. Yeah, I'll use this. I can tell you, actually, our last speaker was saying that he doesn't know how to handle his kids because he gives them television and they just go straight to the computer. Having slightly older kids, I can tell you what I do is just no electronics. Then they're stuck. Nothing they can do. Of course, they make your life miserable in the process. Read a book? What do you mean? I'm happy and honored to have with me George Kliavkoff, who is the Chief Digital Officer of NBC Universal. So much of this revolution in media, cross-platform types of things is coming from television, strangely enough. That medium that was supposed to hidebound and probably by today disappear entirely is actually, in many ways, leading the revolution in a far different way than music did. No one would argue that music led the revolution. So, George, why don't you tell us a little about your background yourself and how you came to your current position, and then we'll start on our fireside chat.
Sure. So, like Jeff, the previous speaker, I'm a recovering attorney. I started out as an intellectual property attorney representing primarily the studios here in Los Angeles, and I worked for 5 years doing that. And then moved up to Seattle and started transactional law and represented some of the very early internet companies. My firm took Amazon and InfoSpace and Starwave and a couple other companies public and did a lot of their deals, and ended up going in-house, but not as an attorney, as a business development executive at Real Networks. And that's where we first met, and spent 5 years running business development for Real Networks Consumer Division, the Real Player and the Real Jukebox. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those products, and forming a subscription service called Real One Super Pass, which was basic cable for the internet, maybe a little bit ahead of its time. And then I spent the last 3 years until the current job working for Major League Baseball, and I ran business development and also their online and IPTV subscription and licensing businesses. And then approximately 6 months ago, I left Major League Baseball to join NBC Universal as the Chief Digital Officer.
It's probably about as ideal a background as you could ask for, given the breadth of things you probably have to deal with at NBC. And you're also here to tell us that Rob Glazer is actually a pussycat, other, reports notwithstanding.
If you make your numbers.
That's true. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your decision to put a lot of your prime time programming on the web. I mean, there must have been people within NBC who were absolutely horrified at that idea.
Well, we decided to do it as sort of a test. We released, 1, then 2, then 3 primetime shows, and eventually most of our primetime lineup. And releasing the full episodes for the first time this fall in October was actually big step for us, and we were, as you can imagine, concerned that it might cannibalize the existing ratings of those shows. And we've done research, and CBS and Disney have also published their research. And I guess the good news is that it does just the opposite. It actually drives ratings for later versions of the show. We find that a lot of the folks that are watching what we call the NBC Rewind player are actually doing it sort of a DVR. They're using it to catch up on episodes that they missed. A full 78% of the folks that were queried as part of the surveys that we conducted by our research team tell us that that's the primary reason why they went online and watched the shows online. The great news is we sell advertising and make decent money. We've done, since October, about 60 million streams of our primetime programs. A good portion, more than 75% of the people that start watching stay for the entire shows, and 81% of the people tell us that they recall the pre-roll ads we did before each of the chapters of the show. We split up the shows into 4 or 5 chapters. We run a pre-roll ad before each one. We're getting better about understanding how long those need to be, and we're trying to make them more interactive, and we're trying to make sure that we don't have advertising fatigue by offering the same advertising before all 5 chapters, which is what we started doing, but we're fixing that. And you know, at the end of the day, it's been terrific for us. It's actually driven ratings we found, and that's been supported by CBS and Disney's research teams as well.
So, are we on the era of a new form of free broadcasting? My own sense was, when I first saw this happen, I too was kind of horrified, thinking, my God, this is the cash cow. And then suddenly I thought about the roots of broadcast television, which was free advertising, of course. And are we close to an era where web advertising, free web advertising for broadcast networks is as important to the broadcast networks as television, or is it always going to be ancillary?
Well, it depends on what you mean by important. You know, one of the challenges that I face every day is the virtual digital P&L for NBCU, as well as for all of the other major media, represent between 5 and 10% of the total revenue of the company for the film studio and for the theme parks and for the television networks. And at the same time, representing 5 or 10% of the revenue, we represent about, you know, 2/3 of what gets discussed in the press. So there's a lot of challenge to sort of figure it out and figure it out quickly, but that's not really what we're focused on. We're not focused on the next press release. We're focused on building long-term sustainable business models. And I guess, you know, I take a half back and look at the landscape, and I believe that over time, and I can't tell you what that time horizon is, maybe it's 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, that all of our products and services will be enjoyed by people on digital platforms, and that technology will allow people to enjoy that content wherever they want it, whenever they want it. You know, it's sort of what everybody's been talking about as the panacea. We'll eventually get there. What I'm responsible for is managing that transition, making sure that the existing business models take advantage of technology to promote the existing business models and to continue to make a majority of our revenue from those business models as long as we can, while still building long-term sustainable business models on digital platform. I think about historically what NBC has done, you know, really, really well, and it's just exactly that. It's managing the transition, right? We managed from AM radio to FM radio to black and white television to color television, you know, to cable, to satellite, to DVDs. I mean, that's what we do well. That's in our genes. So what we really have to do is embrace the technology, understand what the technology does really, really well, and it's different for every platform. What works well on cell phones will not work well on the internet, will not work well on IPTV, but understand the capabilities of each of those different platforms and program for those platforms. And that's what we do, right? We tell stories, we aggregate audiences, and we use a relationship between marketers and the audience. And if we can do that on new platforms, we'll be very successful.
Did you hear the last focus group? Were you here when the kids?
I'm afraid I missed that, although I did sit down and had a good chat with a couple of the kids from Olympic High School, and you know, got an earful about what they are watching and not watching.
Well, what really struck me, certainly from the older people, but as well as the younger people, was how much their television viewing has declined, and how much of their time actually was spent not even on MySpace, but on YouTube. I mean, we're talking in some cases 1-2 hours a day. And there was more than one person who said, I don't watch television at all. It's not in my diet anymore. Does that scare you?
No, it doesn't scare me. That's part of the transition. You know, what we think about is long-term, we try and predict where people are going to be spending their time. And we invest in those platforms, and you know, even if they're nascent and really early. I'll give you an example. You know, if you looked at the number of people that are concurrently on Second Life, which is a virtual world that I presume most people know about, it's a small number compared to any ratings we get for any of our television shows, but we've actually produced events on Second Life to try and get an understanding for how people are spending their time, how they're interacting with each other and with our product on Second Life. You know, the first one we did was in late November. We did a virtual tree lighting ceremony, and we replicated 30 Rockefeller Plaza, which is where my office is, including the skating ring, and we gave out free skates to any virtual skates to any virtual person that showed up. and we did a simultaneous tree lighting, and it turned out to be the largest concurrent event ever held in Second Life on our first try. And again, the numbers, in the aggregate, aren't impressive when you compare them to television ratings, first weekend box office. But again, it's very important for us to know where people are going to be spending their time and start to understand those platforms. It's a lot of how we spend our time.
What's interesting about that was it tied to any NBC properties?
Well, it wasn't necessarily, other than 30 Rockefeller Plaza is part of our brand. It's,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what information does that give you going forward? What types of social media or social network types of projects could you see doing? Or what are you doing now and what do you expect in the near future?
Well, I think social networking is very important. I think giving people tools to be able to communicate with each other about affinity groups is incredibly important. That's really what we have, is a suite of affinity groups, and we can debate whether the affinity groups are the networks themselves or whether they're the shows. But we have fans who like to talk to other fans about our programs and our movies, and providing those is something we're actively working on. We'll have it rolled out across all of our sites by the end of the year.
Anything in place now that you'd care to talk about?
Well, it's a party back there. iVillage has sort of been taking the lead for us. iVillage is our single biggest internet investment to date, and obviously that's a community of women. And early days they provided message boards and other ways for people to communicate, but we're looking for ways to add on to that.
Now, what about YouTube and the fact that content, much of it yours, is being sliced and diced and basically put up wherever anybody wants to put it up? What's your attitude towards that?
I guess I think about our content across a spectrum, right? If you think about one end of the spectrum is sort of short-form promotional content, and the purpose of that promotional content is really to drive people into their living room couch seat or into the box office. Our attitude about that kind of content is, gosh, put it everywhere and put it up as often as we can and encourage people to watch it, because if it truly does what it's supposed to do, it'll help the rest of the business. The other end of the content spectrum is full episodes, full movies, and we're actually pretty aggressive about that. We distribute most of our shows across iTunes, and we're a large portion of iTunes video market share. We put that content up, on almost every platform that's available today, and we figure out a business model around it. But we're about using that to encourage people to build new platforms and to try new business models. And for me, the thing that's really interesting is sort of what fits in between those two ends of the spectrum. So it's the 2-minute recaps of a show, it's the webisodes, it's behind-the-scenes stuff, because that stuff that is absolutely more than promotional and actually has value, but it's also stuff that you can't get on traditional models. So figuring out the mix of that content and how to make that available is a lot of our time and how we spend it.
What do you think about prosecution? I mean, some, being a lawyer, of course, some studios have been very aggressive in prosecuting people who are putting their stuff up, and YouTube and other video sites are having to deal with that. I mean, is that the right approach?
Yeah, it's no comment about specific lawsuits. It's really none of my business. But hypothetically, if you create a business model which is, I'm going to open up a magazine store and give away all of the magazines in the magazine store for free, and you're just going for foot traffic, right? But all of the magazines are going to be ad-supported, and I'm going to give them all away for free. And then it turns out that half of the magazines that are in your store are stolen, and the other half of the magazines that are in your store have content that is, that an advertiser may not want to associate with because it's unpredictable. That's not a long-term business model. And what that says to me is that you actually have to figure out how to work with folks who have quality content that advertisers want to associate themselves with. And we're actively talking to all of the folks who have, large traffic and want to figure out ways to monetize it. We think we're a great vehicle and a partner for doing that. It's interesting because we're aggressive in that space. I think Matt Evans, who was up on the stage earlier, runs the digital studio on my team. Matt was talking about some of the content that happens to MSN Video. We're actively engaged in that stuff. Matt was sitting next to Keith Richmond, who runs Break.com. They got off this stage about 2 hours ago I'm happy to announce that in that 2 hours, we closed a deal with Break.com to sell them a show. So Break.com is going to take our show, they're going to pay for it, they're going to put it up on their site, they're going to sell the advertising against it. We have a business relationship that we're happy with, that they're happy with. The studio at NBC is going to produce it, so it has a veneer of quality that we think advertisers will be attracted to. We're, press release tomorrow morning, but that's the sort of stuff we're focused on, how to create business.
Right. So what about, why do you sell content then on iTunes? You sell a certain amount of it. Why not make it free?
Yeah, given how much we sell it for, I'm not sure it's a good idea. Just teasing. I think people pay for convenience. And I think, far be it from me to figure out a way not to take their money if they're willing to pay for convenience. I mean, I think about, Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett, I'm embarrassed to say, is, my favorite artist. So how do I pay for Jimmy Buffett? Well, I've bought all of his albums, but then when I wanted to load up my iPod, I didn't go rip all those albums. I didn't want to spend the time. So I paid 9 cents for every song I wanted to have, and I was happy to do it. And then, in my car at home, I buy Sirius satellite radio, although I admit it's tuned to, Margaritaville all the time. So, I'm paying an additional, whatever it is, $19.95 a month to have access to Jimmy Buffett, which is exactly the same songs I've already paid twice for before. And that's okay. I mean, I'm paying for the convenience. I'm not paying for the content over and over again. And, selling shows and selling episodes works for the people that buy it, and if it works for them, we have to figure out how to do that. Now, there's a whole issue about whether the price is right. I mean, you think about the fact that you can buy a song on iTunes for 99 cents, but if you want a 10-second version of that song to use as your ringtone, you're going to pay $3.99 for it. Well, either one of those are mispriced, or it turns out that the personalized, of a handheld and the fact that that actually represents you really does mean something. I think it's a little bit of both.
What do you think of the idea of entertainment as a commodity, as a loss leader? I bring this up at almost every conference, the idea that entertainment companies get paid a royalty, kind of like preloading iPods with songs and then selling the iPods. Certainly from the music industry, every time I say that, they say, good Lord, we can't do that. It devalues our...
I'm really on both sides of that debate, right? Because we sell content, but we also license the NFL. And the sports leagues are the folks that people say more often than not are the ones that get paid too much for their content because it drives the rest of their business. And my answer is if it drives the rest of your business, there's value and you should pay for it. We do with the NFL, and folks that are using DVDs of our hit movies to get people in the store so they spend another $120 on diapers. That works. It's a business model and it works, and we should be.
One more question, then we'll take some questions from the audience. Tell me about mobile. How important is that to you? And most specifically, mobile television, which is beginning to roll out.
Yeah, mobile is a huge focus for us. We think it's one of the 2 or 3 big drivers of our digital business in the next couple of years. As we discussed, it's something that people are willing to pay to have content on. Unlike the internet, we've never trained people that the content on mobile devices is free. We haven't had to train them, which I love. We launched with MediaFlow 2 channels as part of their 8-channel offering, and what we found was that you really have to be smart about repackaging and windowing content, and you have to, again, what I said before, you have to know what works really well for each platform and program for that platform, and in some respects that's the digital studio creating original web and wireless content. I don't say original web and wireless video because their mandate is that platform does more than video, so create an interactive experience where video is a component of it. Don't create video. Lots of folks know how to create video. Create an interactive relationship with the customer. But mobile is huge for us. It's a place where people are used to pay for content. It's something that everybody carries with them, and more often than not, the bill goes to your employer.
Ain't that nice?
That's a joke too.
Not your employer, though. And finally, and then I'm going to walk into the audience here and do my Phil Donahue thing. So what's your sense about, we've been talking a great deal about social networking sites, aggregating user-generated content, trying to cut deals with major media companies such as Comcast to distribute the content. How much appetite is there really for this kind of amateur-produced video?
I think for the quality and predictable amateur, there's huge appetite. There's not enough video on the web for the advertisers. I think for the best way to get quality, predictable content may not be today to go with amateur. But if YouTube taught us anything, it's not the distinction between user-generated and non-user-generated, right? For me, user-generated is a misnomer. I mean, I presume Steven Spielberg goes to movies and Aaron Sorkin goes and watches television at night, and that makes everybody a user, so all content is user-generated. Don't know why I call it that, but it should be amateur and professional. It should be quality and non-quality. Quality wins, and amateur or professional distinction matters very little. If it's quality, it'll win.
Okay. Time for just a few.
Hi. What are your plans, if any, to make your content as ad-supported available to other high-traffic websites, and how does that affect your relationships with your affiliates and syndication?
We're actively engaged in discussions with lots of folks about making our content available ad-supported, free on demand with ads. By content, I'm not quite sure if you mean the full episodes of our primetime TV shows or if you mean shorter form content. Yeah, again, primetime full episodes of our shows that's the crown jewels. So we're a little bit more careful about how we build business relationships around that. And the truth is we have existing partners who in the aggregate are paying us billions of dollars, and we have an affiliate network, and we have 10 owned and operated television stations for NBC and 15 for Telemundo. And we have to be careful about how we distribute those full episodes. So it's more likely that we'll lead with the non-full episodes, but figure out the full episodes.
Hi, what do you see as the big obstacle for developing mobile media?
Mobile video?
Yeah, mobile video and mobile media in general.
I'm sorry, mobile video?
Mobile media and mobile video, both.
Right. Well, the biggest obstacle today is network constraints. I mean, that's why I think we're very happy about the media flow arrangements. That's a separate broadcast network that goes off of different towers that are fully dedicated to broadcasting television. But we were very about how we structured those channels so that they'd be very compelling to folks who want to watch television on their mobile phones, and created a product and a service that they could not get on television. So what it is a single channel of NBC News, but it's really the best of NBC News in the morning, including the Today Show live and our primetime programming, with MSNBC content and CNBC content during the day. And it's a single channel, but it's the best of our news programming across all of our networks. The entertainment channel is, NBC content, obviously, and we've cleared a lot of our primetime shows to appear live, but it's also, Bravo and USA and Sci-Fi and some of our other networks producing content that we provide in a time-shifted manner. So it's really the best of our entertainment product, the best of our news product, and we think that's going to create a compelling offering.
Maybe time for one or two more. Any more? Okay.
Thank you. I think to answer your question really briefly, one objective is how you produce the content. You have to adjust for the screen size. That's a key factor. How are you, when you're in production, how are you setting up your shots? That's a very key factor. The other thing that you have to look at is the different devices that that you have to deal with, different operating systems, different video players. But the question I had specifically for you was, you have this affiliate, this huge network of affiliates that you've built up. How are you dealing with them and the issues that they see that the internet's posing by cannibalizing their localized markets? Are you guys using geolocation technologies to try and mitigate that? What are you guys currently doing to try and balance the internet versus the local affiliate interests?
Yeah, a couple of things we've done. The first is we actually formed a new company which is jointly owned by NBC and by our affiliates called NBBC, the National Broadband Company. And the NBBC is in the business of syndicating video across the internet. So we have a couple hundred partners who put content in, and these are sites that have great quality content, but for whatever reason don't want to go out and do 10,000 distribution deals with 10,000 websites, and websites that have traffic but don't have a way to go out and aggregate hundreds of video products from different providers. And we're in that marketplace for video syndication, and we're doing that in partnership with our affiliates. That's been hugely successful, even though it's 3 months old. You know, the other thing about affiliates is, if you look at the internet and what's been done well and what's not been done well and where there might be gaps and opportunities, we think local is a huge opportunity. You know, there's a lot of money spent locally. The local classified ad business and display business is some $40, $50 billion business today, and those are all in newspapers. That might be an opportunity. So we're going to work with our O&Os and with our affiliates to go grab some of that money.
Maybe one last quick question. Do we have any more? Okay.
This is going to be somewhat specific, but we've worked with NBC before. I worked with a retained search firm trying to bring talent into the business side. And as we've noticed here, there have been many different people with many different types of background that have made it into some type of digital media business. Do you find, in being the chief digital officer, that any one particular background works? Or is it just talents that can be transferred over into digital media?
Yeah, no, if all of the bricks are lined up the same way, it's easy to fall over, right? If you build a serpentine wall where everyone faces a little bit different, it's a much stronger wall. You know, we think that actually have a diverse group of people working on digital throughout the company with diverse backgrounds, some of whom come from our corporate parent General Electric, some of whom have worked in the television business, some of whom have digital DNA, is important. We think the mix is important. I mean, you know, I've been working in digital media for more than 10 years, and you know, I'm still a digital immigrant. I'm not a digital native. My kids are digital natives, but I'm a digital immigrant. I didn't grow up with the internet. So what we need to do is get, you know, folks with that background and that DNA, and it was part of, you know, their heritage. But we also need folks who know television, because if everybody's really great at, you know, at digital and doesn't know how to talk to the showrunner from a show, you'll never get anything done.
Okay. All right. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much, George. Okay. Right. We're going to go